Coming up, with a lifetime of memories and community service to residents in Willowbank and Amberley, George Hatchman represents that admirable quality we need more of in the community, and that's volunteering. George is my special guest. Local artists on show at Ipswich Art Gallery, and Inland Rail accepting submissions. It's Friday, January 15, 2021, and I'm Alan Roebuck. Welcome to Ipswich Today, which acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which it is produced and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. This podcast is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. Volunteers are at the heart and soul of every community. In the Ipswich suburbs of Willowbank and Amberley, George Hatchman was instrumental in forming the suburb's residents group. He's also an historian for Number 23 City of Brisbane Squadron Association. Willowbank Area Residents Group, or WAG, was formed by George and others when George was Amberley State School's P&C president about 30 years ago. I caught up with George earlier this week. George Hatchman, your introduction to the Ipswich region was through your RAAF postings at Amberley. What did you think when you got here?
Oh, I guess I was quite happy to be here because I'm a Queenslander and I've been away from Queensland quite some years with the Air Force, and to return back to my home state at probably the end of my Air Force career was quite a good feeling, actually.
Your interest in aircraft goes right back to your childhood. Now, there's a beautiful story about your mum making non-standard RAAF uniforms for you and your twin brother to wear to an air show in Bundaberg. Can you remember that?
Oh, I can. It falls back through my mind. But no, as a kids, we lived in Childers, little town west of Bundaberg, and they were bringing had an air show at Bundaberg Airport. And because Barry and I, that's my twin brother, a young age, were interested in aeroplanes, Mum made us miniature Air Force uniforms. They're pretty good, and took us over. And they had on display the Canberra bomber, which the Air Force had just acquired. Mm-hmm. And that sort of enchanced my brother and myself to really keen our interest in aeroplanes, and the fact that we both joined up together in 1963 into the Air Force's aircraft instrument fitters.
Your mum must have had some sort of premonition. She must have known something at that young age. So RAAF was your destiny, and you made it your lifelong career. After you enlisted, give us a potted history of where you went.
Well, basically, I enlisted in 63. Both my twin brother and I were posted to Wagga for training. I did dentures in an aircraft instrument fitter apprenticeship for 2.5 years at Wagga. Then on completion of that, I was posted to RAAF base Amberley to work on those very Canberra bombers that I'd seen as a kid back at Bundaberg. And then I became appointed as the T4 bomb site specialist for the Canberra bombers. And matter of fact, when the LBJ wanted our government to put the Canberras into Vietnam, they really couldn't because they're a high-level bomber. So I got tasked with Weapons Research Laboratory to see if I could make them bomb down to 0 feet so they wouldn't be SAM missile bait over North Vietnam. So I actually projected one and remodified it, recalibrated, probably a better word, to bomb down to 0 feet. And they sent that off to Weapons Research Laboratory down at South Australia, and further worked on my base modification, developed a bomb site so the aircraft go to Vietnam.
George, you were posted to Amberley twice, and let's fast forward to 1986. You then made moves to get involved in the local Amberley Willowbank community through your children's school. Tell us how that came to pass.
Well, basically, I guess I attended P&C meetings, and I had a bit of an education background by then because I'd been trained in the Air Force as under training management, and I just felt that for my kids and this P&C system at the time was the locals were more farm related and didn't quite understand education. So, and there's some reluctance for people to be involved in P&Cs too. So I accepted the position of president and was occupied that for about 5 years, I think. And I guess where it came from is that my first year as P&C president, I had to make some awards for best student and all sorts of things. So they invited the local federal MP of Ipswich into for the day as a VIP to be associated in presenting awards, and it turned out to be a chap named Les Scott.
Mm-hmm.
He was my best mate at school back when I was at school at Amberley High School. So Les being federal MP, we got to know each other again, and I did a few coffees with him up in his office, and I got to understand a bit of the background to the his governance in Ipswich area. It developed my interest in the social amenity of both Amberley. At that time, it was Amberley.
And for newcomers to Ipswich now, the former Amberley suburb is no longer. It's now behind the wire and part of the base proper. What are your memories of that residential suburb that isn't with us anymore?
Well, it was quite a unique suburb. Obviously, it was all military and predominantly Air Force. And in those days, it was clean, high Queenslander type housing. I mean, it wasn't flash by today, but we were comfortable, and we had a community. It was actually an Amberley community. But with the redevelopment of the base and the perimeter reclaimed, further for the oncoming of the F-111s in those days, a lot of those particular housing was demolished because it was failing to meet current standards because people wanted more modernised sort of buildings, and the assets area was needed for defence use. So I guess defence housing came into play, and they constructed homes off base for airmen to live in. It gave them more modernised aspect, plus it integrated them with the local community rather than being a defence community standing on itself. And I guess that's where I developed further interest, because when I was PNC president of the Amberley State School, I was at that time negotiating purchase of land out here at Willowbank to live, because I was going to retire, and I bought the old military rifle range, believe it or not. But about that time, the Queensland government established a toxic waste dump, relocate the one for Willowbank out to Willowbank. And our state member at the time was named Bill Gunn. And I hadn't really been involved in the rural community, but someone in the rural community put up a petition against having a toxic waste dump in a rural area. And to meet Mr. Bill Gunn out at Mutterpilly School. Well, I was in Air Force at the time. I was in uniform, but I thought I'd duck down at lunchtime because that's when it was organised one day during the week. And here it was. There was probably about 100 locals, helicopters going overhead with news spoke, and Mr. Gunn turned up in his white limo, and the gentleman that was going to give the petitions to Mr. Gunn just froze and said, I can't do it. And when Mr. Gunn said, what am I here for? Everybody just melted back. No one wanted to take the chalice. And so I saw everything going to melt. So I went and grabbed the things. I said, Mr. Gunn, I said, I'll represent the community, because the focus was on me with the camera, so I was Air Force uniform. And I'm not supposed to do that.
No, I didn't think so.
Couldn't see the community fade away, you see, like that. And anyway, was that night, the news was alive at Air Force Warrant Officer, Mr. Hatchman, blah, blah, blah. But what I did when I finished there, I went back and saw my base folk and commanders said, look, you might like this, but I've got to be flashed across TV because I did this. And they said, well, look, we can't officially approve it, but it's good that the uniform showed up in support of local community. And that was a switch moment, because there used to be them and us between the military and the locals. There was always this thing about the military. They were one entity and the community was another, never shall the same part. I agitated with a local, I advocated for Miss Thompson, which is it was a federal MP at the time, that we should form a group and amalgamate both the Air Force and local community together and discuss issues, become neighbours. And that was perpetuated by Shane Newman, our current federal MP, many years ago. And out of it, we formed the ACWG, which is the Amberley Consultative Working Group. So we now have a federally approved situation where the community, which includes RAAF or ADF representatives from the Air Force Base, we have the federal, state and local government members and selected community members, which I'm one, and we sit together and we discuss issues that translate between the base and community, so that we act as a bridge. And I mean, we've got to accept the military's in presence, and the military got to accept that there's community. So we sort of bridge and discuss those issues, noise complaints, and so that we're working on a neighbourly integrated community rather than them and us. I thought another gentleman, Ian Dana, who's the Air Force officer also, and we've made a fairly formidable team. I'm good at entrepreneurial things. Ian's good at the administrative side of things. So the core of it, the two of us have really developed WAG and perpetuated over these last 30 years.
So the Willowbank Area Residents Group formed exactly when?
Originally, it's a Willowbank residents group.
Right.
It was an incorporated body way back about 30 years ago. Once this issue with the Mutapilli waste facility came, that was the toxic waste. Once that was put to bed, we're okay. Then coal mining came to Willowbank, and there was a company by the mine at Mitsu that said, let us out of the blue to people saying that we're going to resume your land or do this. Any objection, we'll take you to court. And it was very, very uncivil kind of thing. So I bought the military rifle range of the Air Force and set up the Queensland Police Firearms Training and the SSA Shooting Club, and they just told me one day they were going to take my land off me, no consideration. And I said, no, thank you, see me in court. So they took me to court. And I had no legal representation, and myself and others, but I stood my ground along with my wife, Christine, and we countenanced two QCs in the Magistrates Court, and we kind of won. And then on that, it became a more consolidated, because David Pelkey had been recently elected, and he was trying to act for the interests of all the other residents, and we had a combined objection against the mines, and out of that there was a resolution came that all the Willowbank landowners or residents who were going to be directly affected by mining would get a consideration. So we formed the Willowbank area, formalised it, the Willowbank Area Residents Group.
Mm-hmm. And so that's what we now call WAG.
That's what we now call WAG, except there was another evolution. Because we had a successful countenance to the mines, and the mines just couldn't push us over, along came another company then when the mining had finished one of their voids to set up a landfill in one of the voids. Well, that lit us up like a match. That was a company called Colex. And we said, not in our community, thank you. But I think it then was the mayor was John Nugent, came out and said, George, these people need to be considered and listened to. So combined, we had a meeting with the Colex people and the mayor's office and myself and Ian, and we discussed the issues and said, well, we've got to be realistic, I suppose, that industry has to exist and people, there's jobs, etc. But there has to be a mediation process. You just can't sort of announce these things and then expect the community to wear it. So we went on a 2-year program with Colex where we said, well, you can prove us how you're not going to really affect our rural amenity and our residential, social, environmental amenity, and then we'll stick by our word and we'll give approval. But if there's any negative, that's it. We'll block up.
George Hatchman also reminded me that this funding was allocated by Ipswich City Council to improve the environment and social amenity of the area. Groups to benefit included koala protection and rural fireries. This came in the form of a levy Council introduced some years ago on at least one company in the Willowbank area. I also asked George what still needs to be done. He wasn't short of suggestions like keeping any future waste industries accountable and the much-needed upgrade of the Cunningham Highway.
There's been a costing done, $340 million to duplicate the Cunningham Highway and provide a safe turn off to Amberley Air Force Base and also right out to the Willowbank drag strip.
Mm.
So the federal government put $170 million on the table, but and with a request for the state government to match the $170 million. Well, sad to say, the state government's taken $170 million, not spent it on the Cunningham Highway. They've done a bit of works there, but the money's been spent elsewhere in the state. We're totally disappointed with that because we see the Amberley Air Force Base as the major establishment in military establishment in Australia, and there's up to 2 kilometre backups of traffic every morning trying to get in the base. The blocks are Cunningham Highway up, truck movements, interstate, domestic. It's just a clogman, and there seems to be no cognizance for the state government to rectify that problem.
George, I think it'd be fair to say then that there's some unfinished business for WAG, and that would be one of them.
That's one of them. It's ongoing. There's also, we've got the aspect of a company by the Land Track and Wanless, one who established waste facilities here at Willowbank also, but they didn't take the Colex approach. They just basically said, we're doing this, and if you complain, put your objections in, but we're just, that's what we're going to do.
You have a great sense of respect for history, and this is borne out by some of your other community volunteering roles. What are you still actively involved in?
I basically still retain an interest in developing the history of Rat Base Amberley and the Willowbank area. It's quite unique in the fact that it may not be well known, but there's acreage. We all have residential acreage. But the first rural residential or rural acreage in Queensland was Willowbank, because an early pioneer, and some say he was an early convict on release, the name of Darby and McGrath, bought up lots of regional land grants or selections and combined them together to create Willowbank Sheep and Cattle Station, which lay along the Wirral Creek and now over the lands, which is now Amberley. And in I think it was the 13th of February 1879, he auctioned these off as Willowbank Estate. Wow. And those small parcels of land became the first rural subdivisions in Queensland, because up at that time mainly was land grants and that sort of thing. So he was the first entrepreneur who did that.
RAAF and service to country continues to run in the Hatchman family veins. Your children have also taken up the mantle. How are they going?
Oh, look, it was fine. I guess one of those things is called that brat. So they're the offspring of members of the defence. I married my wife, who was in the Air Force, Christine, and she's been in the vein of my support right through the years. I mean, and you've got to look at women back in those days. They never had the opportunities we had. Women, when they were married, had to get out of the Air Force and never could develop careers. So anyway, our kids were brought up in the RAAF envelope, going from base to base, and when they came of age, I guess there was a natural interest in following it up on that. So I've got a daughter who's now a squadron leader. She's left the Air Force, but she's a reservist. She's an environmental health officer. I've got another daughter that's a flight lieutenant in the reserve. She's an IT manager out here at Rat Base Amberley, working for the Department of Defence. And then I've got another son that he joined the Navy. He wanted to work on helicopters, so we don't have them in the Air Force, so he joined the Navy to work on helicopters. So he now he worked for the Navy many years, but he got offered a job working Navy helicopters out here at Eagle Farm. Another daughter, well, she did the other way. She became an au pair and went to work for an American naval commander over in Pennsylvania in the United States. And she's today a flight centre, like a centre manager.
George Hatchman, you've been so generous with your time. Fascinating knowledge of local history in the Willowbank and Amberley districts. Thank you so much for talking to Ipswich Today.
Thanks a lot, Alan. All the best.
And briefly, Ipswich residents are being encouraged to have their say on a section of the Inland Rail project planned to run through part of the Ipswich local government area. The entire project runs from Melbourne to Brisbane. The Queensland Coordinator-General has released the draft Environmental Impact Statement, Calvert to Kangaroo, for public comment until the 8th of March 2021 and is accepting formal submissions until then. The artworks of 7 Ipswich artists, recognised among 30 finalists in the 2020 Queensland Regional Art Awards, are currently on show at the Ipswich Art Gallery as part of the Decadence touring exhibition presented by Flying Arts Alliance. Ipswich artist Leanne Vincent took out the major $10,000 Art for Life Award and the Spotlight Award for her artwork Flourish, which explores the idea that botanic growth is made richer from the decadence of other plants. Decadence will be on display at Ipswich Art Gallery until January 26. And U3A Ipswich and West Moreton is having an open day on January 19 at Glebe Road Uniting Church. There you can check out 50 courses on offer and meet the tutors. U3A is supported by volunteers and is always open to hearing from anyone who'd like to help. For more information on courses or volunteering, visit u3aipswichwm.org.au. Ipswich Today is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. This podcast is also listener-supported. Please make a once-only gift or regular donation to help keep it online. Just go to ipswichtoday.com.au and click the donate button at the bottom of the page. You can subscribe for free and share this podcast from your favourite app, including iHeartRadio, or play Ipswich Today from your smart speaker. Music is supplied by Purple Planet Music. This is Alan Roebuck. Thanks for listening.